Hello, welcome to the Talking Europe interview on France 24. Coming to you today from the sidelines of the European Council Summit in Brussels. We're meeting the Prime Minister of the most recent member of the European Union family, Croatia, Andrej Plenković. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation. My pleasure.
Well, there's certainly a lot happening in Europe at this point. Many issues that are vying for the top headline spot. Perhaps we ought to start with Catalonia. Your country, it's not a direct comparison, of course, but also emerged from the breakup of another state, Catalonia wanting to separate from Spain. It's a hugely contentious issue. What's your position on the Catalonia issue? What's the ideal solution?
Well, first of all, as you rightly pointed out, we can't really compare exactly what Croatia and other today independent and internationally recognized countries that once were the republics of the former Yugoslavia passed through in 1991. We had a different legal basis, which was the Constitution of 1974, plus the democratic election, plus the post-Berlin Wall Europe, and the, of course, so clear majority in our referendum, more than 90% of the people wanted Croatia to become independent. Here in Catalonia, we have a different constitutional setup, which is important. Plus, we have a rather divisive situation within Catalonia itself. So, position of Croatia is, of course, to advise and to appeal for dialogue, for absolutely avoiding any violence in whatever aspect we can see it. And we hope that Prime Minister Rajoy and leaders of Catalonia can, through dialogue, find solutions which are viable and do not create further tensions in the country.
Now, this comes at a time of rising support for nationalist and populist forces around Europe more broadly. Do you see the Catalonia situation as being a danger to the European Union, to its broader stability?
Well, we have seen relatively recently a referendum in Scotland, so I wouldn't say this is the only situation of such a nature. I think that the issue of fragmentation of some of the member states is a latent one, but I believe that today, when you look at the European Union, when you look at the competencies of states, when you look at the competencies of the EU itself, of the mixed competencies, I think with the principles of subsidiarity and proportionality, we can very much address the participation of different layers of government. And therefore, in this particular case, we really strongly advise on dialogue.
All right, well, let's move on to one of the other top headline issues currently in Europe, the UK's wish to leave the European Union, the so-called Brexit. The negotiations have been rocky at best in recent weeks. Do you, as a leader of a European member state, have confidence in Theresa May and her government to see Brexit through?
Well, first of all, I very much regret that at the referendum which was held in the United Kingdom, the result was a negative one. Negative one, I believe, because in my view it was certainly a lose for David Cameron, who as a Prime Minister called for this referendum. It will certainly be a lose in terms of economic, financial, social effects for the UK, as well as for its global positioning in international relations. And it is a lose for the European Union. The Union without a permanent member of the Security Council, without a country who is the champion of the free trade, without a country who strongly contributes to our security, our defense, it is not the same type of union. Also in terms of budgetary implications because of the contribution of the United Kingdom. So I have the feeling that Theresa May and her government are now being given a task that she has to thank for someone else. And it is a sort of ungrateful position, if I may call it that way. But what I saw in her speech in Florence, in my view, it was a little bit like a testament of the UK regarding the EU, and she wants to go further. What we are walking into is the uncharted waters. Article 50 exists only after the Lisbon Treaty. We've never implemented it before, and it's a new exercise both for the EU, for the Commission and for the UK. We will see how the process will develop, but I understand that the 2 years which are given is certainly a deadline within which we should address all the major issues, and of course the financial package as well as the rights of the citizens, whether UK in EU or EU citizens in UK, are on the top of the agenda.
Well, indeed, it seems that on the British side and on the European side, people are talking about the same issues, EU citizens' rights, among others. However, there is a sense for many people in the UK who want to leave the European Union that Europe is being difficult, punishing the UK for wanting to leave.
No, I don't think so. First of all, nobody pushed out the United Kingdom from the EU. On the contrary, I even believe that many people are actually sorry for this fact, and it was a national decision. We have issues, generally speaking, with referenda on EU dossiers in other European countries. It's very difficult to win a referendum on the EU topic today, no matter whether it's UK or some other countries, because of the populist forces, because of the sentiment, because of the new communication, media, social networks environment. And it is a type of communication where there are, honestly speaking, many false information sort of flowing around as if they were truth. I remember.
Perhaps as well, Europe is a little bit too set in its ways, not very good at communicating about itself.
Yeah, maybe, but that is rather a technical issue. I think we are now in the phase where the news lasts very shortly. People are becoming very superficial. It's all headlines. It's several 140 dots or something else. It's not, in my view, enough to go deep into the dossier, because this is the whole problem. And I remember that debate. I had the impression all the time that people were really overwhelmed with the false data and sort of threats and non-accurate information, and I don't think that was fair. So if it was a bit more fair, the whole debate, then maybe the result would have been different.
There are those in the UK talking about there being a second referendum, a reversal of Brexit. Do you see that as a possibility? Wouldn't that be incredibly destabilising once again for the EU?
Well, that is a matter also for the UK, but it's very unusual to have second referenda on such an issue, because it was a national issue. We had two referenda once on the EU issue, you remember, in Ireland. First one was a negative one, second one was a positive one, but it is up to the UK politicians and the people to decide on such eventual scenario, if there might be one.
Indeed. All right, let's move on to another major preoccupation for the entire European Union for several years now, the migration crisis. Croatia, of course, one of the countries on what's come to be known as the Balkans route. Now, the number of people accessing the EU through that side of the bloc has drastically diminished since the deal was struck between the EU and Turkey. However, it's not resolved the crisis. We can take a look now, in fact, at a report which brings us a little bit up to date on the situation.
On the Greek island of Samos, tents have become a part of the landscape. Nearly 300 people, many from Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, are camped here among the island's olive trees.
You see this situation, everybody is in bad situation, like we don't have air, anything, but the weather is so cold. This is the problem.
Naween is one of over 5,000 people who have arrived on Greek islands since September. The country is seeing its highest rate of daily arrivals since March of 2016. That was the month Turkey agreed to take back migrants from Greece in exchange for billions of euros in European aid. The landmark deal caused arrivals to drop, but they've risen again in recent months, filling reception centers like the one in Samos to over twice their capacity.
We hope that there will be measures in place to mitigate the risks from the winter. Already the conditions are very difficult, because in a center that its capacity is for about 700 people, we see now that there are more than 2,000 people.
The surge in new arrivals comes at a time when aid organizations have had to lower their presence on the ground. To combat the overcrowding, Greek authorities have begun transferring some asylum seekers to the mainland. But with the Balkan route closed, refugees still have to remain in Greece during the lengthy asylum process, another stipulation of the March 2016 deal.
So, Andreja Plenković, the EU-Turkey deal, it has, as we've said, reduced the number of people making that often life-threatening journey across to Europe and further into the bloc. However, we've seen people are still suffering, and there has been this increase in the number of people making it to Europe. Critics of that deal say it's not working, it was never going to work, new ideas are going to be needed soon. What do you think?
Well, I think compared to what we have seen in 2015-2016 period, and you recall it very well, that the Eastern Mediterranean Balkan route has been more or less stable. It is, the percentage compared to that one is very, very low. So I would say that the effects of the deal between the European Union and Turkey were positive in terms of controlling the process of Turkey hosting the majority of the refugees and migrants on their territory, together with Jordan and Lebanon, because these are the three countries that have given shelter to the people in need who were fleeing for their lives. However, I think we should continue this dialogue with Turkey. Turkey is an important country in our neighborhood. It is a country that can cater for so many people at once. And I think that what the essential task of the European Union is to have a comprehensive migration policy, to keep the external borders functioning well and try to solve the problem at the roots of the causes, including all of our means, whether it's foreign policy, economic policy, trade policy, humanitarian policy, or simply adhering to the international law.
Indeed, currently there are many situations of it really being on a country-by-country basis. In recent months, we have had reports from Human Rights Watch that police at certain border points in Croatia were forcing asylum seekers back across the border into non-EU member Serbia. Is Croatia fulfilling its legal responsibilities towards asylum seekers?
Croatia is fulfilling its responsibilities, absolutely, both with the terms of resettlement, relocation. I think we have extended on several occasions our readiness to show the solidarity, of course, given the size and given the economic strength of the country. What we are also doing, we are a country that wants to join the Schengen space and the Schengen zone. So my country is investing a lot that our borders are fully controlled with adequate infrastructure, with technical equipment. We have even managed to completely use 2 envelopes of 80 plus 40 million euros, so 120 million euros that we were given at the moment of our entry into the European Union. And therefore, Croatia is preparing for Schengen, which is our big next step in terms of our European road. And I would like to see a political decision sometime during 2019.
Well, speaking about Schengen, about borders, there is an ongoing dispute between your country and neighbouring Slovenia about the border. It would appear that Croatia is rejecting a legal ruling from the European Union that set out where that border should run. Why are you disputing that ruling, and will there be a resolution soon?
It's a bit more complex than that. It's not at all an EU ruling. EU as such and its institutions, they don't deal with international law matters such as the borders of the states. What we had was the situation about 8-9 years ago when Croatia was negotiating accession, that Slovenia, our neighbor at the time, blocked 14 chapters of the acquis, and we were facilitated by the Commission to enter into an arbitrage process for the ad hoc arbitration in order to settle the matter of the open border issues, because it was one of those residual issues from the dissolution of the former Yugoslavia. The point was that Croatia entered in good faith in this exercise. We have invested a lot of money, a lot of expertise, Croatian and domestic international law experts. Unfortunately, in 2015, we found out that the entire arbitration process was contaminated and corrupted, not by our fault, but by the fault of the Slovenian side. At that time, I was a member of the European Parliament, not in my position here. The Croatian Parliament unanimously decided to withdraw from the arbitration process. So this arbitration award, which came only in July, after the court itself, without judges appointed by Croatia or by Slovenia, decided on its own to continue, came with the award which Slovenia would like to implement and Croatia cannot accept. But what I can say and what is the policy of Croatia is that we do have open border issue with Slovenia. We are willing to solve it. We are willing to solve it through a bilateral dialogue in the spirit of good neighborly relations and with our friendly country.
All right, well, let's look to the future then. Croatia has, as I've said, been a member of the European Union for 4 years. You've been in charge of the country for 1 year. It's, your anniversary has just passed. Now, we've got some ambitious plans coming out for Europe from the French President Emmanuel Macron, from the European Commission head Jean-Claude Juncker in recent weeks. They see more Europe, more federalisation. Is there perhaps, though, a risk in that? Is sort of pushing too hard that this could present a challenge to those parts of Europe that are feeling a little bit more hesitant about that? Could they be too ambitious?
Well, I think it's good for the European project that in the context of Brexit, which is a very unfortunate one and sort of is with us already for a while and will remain with us also for a while, that we have this new political enthusiasm coming from French President Macron, who I think deliberately chose the word sovereignty in his speech at Sorbonne, so as to see it on the European level. My feeling is that now we are balancing this sort of blues of Brexit and more enthusiasm coming from him and also from Juncker's speech in the European Parliament. I think at the end of the day, we should find a reasonable ambition from today until the next European Parliament elections, which is the mid-2019, try to use to the maximum what the treaties, the policies and the budget gives us, try to be as concrete towards our citizens. This is my task. My citizens are wondering how much concretely European Union affects my daily life, increases my salary, puts my social standard into a better position. This is, I think, the key task, and of course to address the global challenges that we have. So I welcome this initiative, but what I have gathered so far in the debate with my colleagues, that we will try to find some sort of way where the newly now conceived leaders' agenda, where the European Council members will get more involved in concretely trying to deliver on various policies, issues which are on the agenda of the EU.
All right, well, unfortunately, that is all we have time for, but thank you so much for speaking to us here on France 24. Andrej Plenković, Croatian Prime Minister, and thanks to you very much for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.